1999 might be the single greatest year gaming ever had. The PS1, N64, Dreamcast, and PC were all firing on all cylinders at once, pumping out genre-defining classics that shaped the next 2 decades. These are 18 games from that year still worth playing today. Sega couldn't afford another Saturn-style disaster, and Soul Calibur made sure the Dreamcast launched swinging. Namco had barely touched Sega hardware before this, which made the game's arrival even more surprising, and it blew the arcade original completely out of the water. A sequel to Soul Edge, set in a fantastical 1500 Europe torn apart by a cursed sword. It built its combat around weapon range and recovery time, every swing demanding real spacing and commitment. The 8-way movement system stood out as the genuine innovation, free circular movement around opponents instead of a simple sidestep, opening up strategy that took time to master, but felt intuitive once it clicked. Weapons clashed and cancelled mid-swing, and the roster's variety went beyond stats. Broadswords swung slow with massive reach, daggers hit fast and close, Maxie's nunchucks added a rhythm nothing else matched. This ran at a rock-solid 60 frames per second with fully 3D backgrounds. A genuine leap ahead of anything else on shelves at the time. The realistic grounded combat style meant no projectiles or gravity-defying combos, which some fighting game fans coming from Street Fighter found took real adjustment. Still, this stood as Namco's finest fighting game, full stop, and the genre's undisputed gold standard on Dreamcast. Chrono Trigger's legacy set an impossibly high bar, and Chrono Cross somehow cleared it. Following up one of the best RPGs ever made on Super Nintendo is never going to be easy, but this felt both distinct and worthy of the name. Over 40 playable characters carried distinct accents and speech patterns, an ambitious writing feat most RPGs of the era never attempted, wrapped around a story spanning environmental collapse, fate, and parallel worlds tied closely to its predecessor. Combat dropped random encounters almost entirely, monsters sat visible on the field and could be avoided, turning most fights into intentional boss confrontations rather than annoying interruptions. The battle system ran deep, stamina points, elemental grids, 6 opposing color types that made party composition genuinely strategic, plus character-specific tech skills and summon attacks that rewarded careful setup. Visually, this stood among the best on PlayStation, pre-rendered backgrounds packed with living detail, animated chandeliers, birds, wandering cats, and animation that outclassed nearly everything else in the genre. Boss difficulty swung unevenly, easy late-game pushovers against brutally tough optional fights, and the soundtrack, excellent overall, never produced one track that stuck the way Chrono Trigger's did. Even with those wrinkles, this earned its place as one of the finest RPGs on PlayStation. Rare followed up Banjo-Kazooie and GoldenEye with something completely original, and Jet Force Gemini turned out epic enough to fill 30-plus hours without feeling padded. Juno, Vela, and Lupus the dog each explored unique worlds toward Mizar's palace, each carrying a distinct traversal power, lava walking, underwater swimming, extended hovering, forcing genuine backtracking to unlock secrets only certain characters could reach. Combat carried the experience. Over 14 weapons each served a real purpose. Tri-rockets for crowds, shurikens to decapitate shielded ants, homing missiles for stubborn drones, and smart enemy AI that hid behind cover and occasionally surrendered rather than fight. 5 massive boss fights demanded real strategy and delivered genuine satisfaction on the kill. 2-player co-op stood out too, one player controlling the main character while a partner ran Floyd the robot sidekick, picking off distant snipers from cover. Sound design impressed just as much. Dolby surround effects that made blood splatter and bullet ricochets feel tangible. The frame rate buckled hard in open areas, manual targeting felt unintuitive even after 45 hours, and mandatory tribal rescues respawned every enemy on repeat visits, turning exploration into a grind. The 4-player deathmatch mode barely functioned. Still, this stood as one of the N64's most original games. More good than bad by a wide margin. Street Fighter III Third Strike never chased mainstream approachability, the way Street Fighter II or IV eventually did. This was the series' most technical entry by far, built for veterans who understood parrying, cancels, and frame-perfect timing, and it made no apologies for locking out button mashers entirely. That difficulty was also the point. Parrying in particular became the game's signature system, deflecting attacks with precise timing rather than blocking passively, turning matches into genuine mind games between players who knew the mechanic inside and out. Combos, cancels, and animations carried real weight and consistency, rewarding the frame counting and reads that separated casual players from serious competitors almost instantly. The character roster leaned into personality and distinct play styles rather than pure balance, giving high-level matches a real sense of identity. Years later, an online edition release proved just how well the core system held up. Arcade perfect accuracy carried over intact, and new trial modes finally gave newcomers a real entry point into pairing without getting steamrolled immediately. The learning curve stayed brutal by design, and anyone hoping to pick this up casually without study time was in for a rough time at the arcade cabinet. Even today, few fighters demand this level of precision, and that's exactly why the competitive scene never let it go. Blood Omen's top-down RPG gave way to something closer to Tomb Raider, and Kain flipped from protagonist to antagonist. Centuries after choosing to rule Nosgoth rather than save it, he tore the wings from his lieutenant Raziel out of jealousy and cast him into a watery grave. An elder god pulled him back, jawless and rotted, transformed into a soul devourer hunting his former master. The spirit realm shift stood as the core puzzle mechanic. Warped structures bent into climbable shapes absent from the material world, forcing constant back and forth to progress. Killing vampires through fire, water, stakes, or spikes kept Raziel fed early on, but earning the Soul Reaver blade, a glowing blue energy trail wrapped around his arm, made combat genuinely satisfying, an explosive finishing punch that never got old. Visually, this ranked among the best on PlayStation, subtle lighting shifts, the half-flooded drowned abbey reflecting gothic ceilings and rippling water, and a model detailed enough to invite camera spins, just to admire him. Camera controls handled cleanly too, following Spyro's lock-on style with barely any frustration. Navigation got confusing at times, teleport gates marked with obscure symbols instead of text, and the whole experience leaned easy. Simple bosses, forgiving puzzles, an ending that cut off with little closure. Still an extraordinarily deep, atmospheric adventure worth revisiting glyph by glyph. Working designs went all out on this one. Lunar itself, a making of disc, a full-color cloth map, a hardbound instruction booklet, and a full soundtrack CD, all in one package. That kind of presentation was rare even by late 90s RPG standards. The 16-bit era visuals got a redo for this PS1 release, recolored and cleaned up to look lusher than the original Sega CD version, even if the jump to PlayStation left the graphics feeling dated compared to what else was on shelves. Sound carried far more weight, an excellent soundtrack packed with genuine English vocal tracks. Luna's boat song in particular stood out as one of the most memorable pieces of music in any RPG from that era. The story leaned fully into classic territory, in-depth, lifelike characters, and a plot that deepened steadily the further you pushed into it. Combat brought real challenge too, tougher than most RPGs of the time, de noir. Sparse, but genuinely difficult boss fights that demanded actual preparation rather than just leveling up blindly. Voice acting during cutscenes occasionally came off a little grating, a minor blemish against everything else here. At 35 plus hours, this earned every bit of its reputation as one of the finest RPGs of 1999, right alongside Final Fantasy VIII, in a genre lane entirely its own, and worth every penny of that premium package price. Looking Glass had already broken every genre convention going: RPG depth in Ultima Underworld, cinematic tension in the original System Shock, squad tactics before tribes existed. System Shock 2 and pulled all of that together into something defined by one word: atmosphere. Set aboard the Von Braun, a faster-than-light vessel torn between UNN authority and corporate control, the story unfolded through PDA messages, scattered audio logs from a doomed crew, and unsettling psychic ghosts glimpsed in the corridors. Zombies felt genuinely dangerous, smart enough to use weapons, flee when outgunned, and mutter disturbing pleas mid-attack, while cyber assassins hid in shadows and relocated after every failed strike. Character building leaned into RPG territory, choosing between Marine, Navy, or Psychic OSA training, then investing scarce modules into 10 distinct skills: hacking, research, energy weapons, psychic powers, rewarding real specialization over trying to master everything. Sound design carried the horror further, every log read aloud by its writer, ambient creature noises warning you before danger appeared on screen. Weapon maintenance demanded constant micromanagement, guns jamming mid-fight if left unrepaired, an irritating layer piled on top of ammo, and skill requirements that occasionally undercut the tension it was clearly meant to build. Few games this smart or this genuinely unsettling existed on shelves at the time. Gran Turismo 2 looked deceptively similar to its predecessor at a glance, but the depth ran deeper under the hood of every car. Over 500 fully licensed vehicles raced with physics precise enough to feel like an actual test drive, and Polyphony backed it up with cities for Japanese, German, French, Italian, and American manufacturers, each stocked with real specs and history. Arcade mode kept things approachable, but simulation mode was the real draw. 6 license tiers, a streamlined menu, and the ability to import progress from the original GT via memory card. Content ballooned far beyond the first game. 49 total tracks, counting mirrored and night variants, excellent rally racing with monster power slides, and a licensed soundtrack that fit the racing perfectly. Every car's engine was hand-recorded, giving each a distinct sound that changed with every upgrade, and post-race replays looked convincing enough to mistake for real broadcast footage. Race classes came with strict power restrictions this time, so you couldn't just buy the fastest car and dominate every event like in the original. You had to think about which car fit which race and tune accordingly. That single change made the whole experience far richer, forcing mastery of different driving styles instead of leaning on one overpowered garage pick. This didn't just improve on the original, it redefined what a racing simulator could offer. Yu Suzuki set out to build the first truly living virtual world, and Shenmue delivered something no console game had attempted before. Ryo Hazuki hunts his father's killer through the small Japanese town of Yamanos, but the mystery mattered less than simply existing inside it, picking up objects with fingers that actually gripped and rotated them, wandering into an arcade stocked with perfect ports of Space Harrier and Hang On, feeding vending machine coins into a city that felt genuinely inhabited. The free battle mode carried real weight from Suzuki's Virtua Fighter pedigree, no blocking, only precisely timed parries and dodges, with new moves earned through practice, flashbacks, or step-by-step lessons from other characters using the VMU. Quick-time events flowed seamlessly out of cutscenes without a single loading pause, keeping the cinematic feel intact even during action beats. English voice work held up well overall. Tom's laid-back drawl and Lundy's chilling calm stood out especially, backed by a soundtrack built around Asian instrumentation that supported scenes without ever overwhelming them. Minor joint rendering glitches showed up during close-ups. The camera occasionally clipped through objects mid-fight, and throw animations lacked the polish expected from the Virtua Fighter team. Nothing else in Dreamcast came close to this level of detail, ambition, or sheer immersive craft. Final Fantasy VII mastered the epic, but 8 mastered something harder, the personal. Square trimmed the cast to 6 central characters, Squall Leonhard and his classmates at the Military Academy Garden, and built relationships believable enough to hold up under scrutiny. What started as a schoolyard drama about CD mercenaries and a sorceress named Idea eventually spanned the entire globe, and the twists piled up so cleverly that early assumptions about the plot looked laughably wrong by the finale. The series finally abandoned its super deformed art style here, field models, battle models, and FMV all matching for the first time, giving emotional scenes weight cartoonish proportions never could. Motion captured animation set the visuals apart. Characters didn't just move, they acted, and the Disc 1 dance sequence stood alongside Final Fantasy VI's famous opera scene. Combat introduced the draw and junction systems, pulling magic directly from enemies instead of a traditional MP pool, then linking Guardian Forces to stats for deep rewarding customization. Triple Triad became a fully realized minigame too, rare cards convertible into rare items and weapons, tying it back into progression. The soundtrack, while excellent, fell just short of Uematsu's Super Nintendo era peak, and sound effects during regular gameplay felt merely average against the FMV sequences. This stands as the boldest reinvention the series ever attempted, and it earned every bit of that ambition. Unreal Tournament shipped ready for Quake 3 comparisons, but it ended up feeling closer to flawless than nearly anything else on shelves. Where most shooters launched with a handful of deathmatch variants and left mods to the community, this came stacked with genuinely distinct modes out of the box. Domination and Capture the Flag delivered the expected team tension, but Assault stood out hardest mission-style objectives like the Normandy Beach Recreation, one team attacking, the other defending, then swapping roles to beat the clock. Weapon design carried real personality too. The Ripper's bouncing razor blades could decapitate around corners. The rocket launcher let you load 6 rockets before unleashing them at once. And the shock rifle's tertiary combo detonated a slow-moving energy ball into a room-clearing blast. Mutators like Fat Boy, where getting shot shrank you and kills bulked you up, added nearly endless replayability on top of an already deep options menu. Presentation matched the substance, level design from Cliff Bleszinski standing out especially, and escalating kill announcements, double kill, multi-kill, monster kill, made every good streak feel earned. The bio rifle felt weak compared to everything else in the arsenal, and the game shipped with noticeably fewer player skins than some competitors offered. This delivered one of the most polished, endlessly replayable shooters of its era, running flawlessly straight out of the box. Side-scrolling shooters had already been declared extinct by the Polygon era, but Metal Slug X refused to get the memo. SNK's superior sequel finally landed on PlayStation, shorter than the Neo Geo original and missing a few animation frames due to hardware limits, but still one of the sweetest shooters money could buy. 5 or 6 levels blazed by in a single evening, but every second stayed packed with action. An unending parade of enemies, weapons, and vehicles that rarely let up. Machine guns, shotguns, flamethrowers, lasers, even a strange remote-controlled toy kept combat varied. And hopping into a Slugnoid or the original metal slug tank offered a genuinely fun break from running and gunning, Vulcan cannons mowing down waves of enemies with satisfying overkill. Animation stood out as a real showpiece, 4 distinct playable characters each with their own movement, and even faceless grunt enemies carried personality, charging forward, fleeing in terror, laughing over fallen comrades. Sound effects reused from the Neo Geo ROM still landed hard. Shotgun blasts and chattering machine guns, drowning out any weaker sampling underneath. The genre's simplicity meant less enemy pattern variety than something like Contra or Gunstar Heroes, leaning harder on spectacle than invention. For anyone willing to replay it and master a 1-credit clear, this remains one of the finest 2D shooters ever made. Reflections built their name on Destruction Derby's destructible car physics, and Driver turned that foundation into a full-blown car chase movie you could direct yourself. Set in a stylized 1970s underworld of muscle cars and blaxploitation cool, players worked undercover through the Castrati crime family, testing skills first in a 1-minute interview mode before hitting the streets. The physics carried the whole experience, heavy 8-cylinder cars sliding into 180Ss, launching off San Francisco's steep hills and crumpling realistically on impact, with every car on the road, not just yours, taking permanent damage. Surface types genuinely changed handling, grass, dirt, and asphalt, each demanding different techniques, especially brutal in survival mode against relentless cop pursuit. Director mode turned out to be the real master stroke. Flexible camera placement anywhere in the world, letting players replay completed missions as fully edited chase scenes, genuinely addictive in a way few other tools in gaming managed. City recreations of San Francisco, Miami, and New York carried real geographic accuracy down to the steepness of specific streets. Load times ran uncomfortably long for a 1999 release, Occasional crashes interrupted otherwise smooth missions, and the game's jarring auto camera zoom near obstacles took some getting used to. Few driving games delivered this much freedom, spectacle, and raw, destructive satisfaction in one package. Jill Valentine barely had time to recover from the original mansion incident before Raccoon City's zombie outbreak dragged her right back in, quitting Stars only to get caught up in events unfolding the night before Resident Evil 2. Nemesis turned out to be the most technically refined entry yet. Sharper pre-rendered backgrounds, higher resolution character models, and faster load times than either prior game managed. Controls stayed familiar but sharper, a new auto-aim function and cut down on wasted ammo without softening the challenge, and a defensive sidestep let Jill dodge Nemesis's relentless rocket launcher assaults. The new ammo crafting system added real strategy too, mixing gunpowder types into explosive or acid rounds depending on what a given fight demanded, and choice-driven branching paths at key story moments meant repeat playthroughs rarely played out identically. Puzzles got noticeably fairer as well, ditching the cruel backtracking traps that plagued earlier entries in the series. This dropped down to a single character and single disc compared to the previous game's two-character, four-scenario structure, making for a noticeably shorter campaign, though a post-game bonus minigame that unlocked unlimited ammo weapons softened that blow considerably. Judged on its own terms, this stood as another genuine refinement in one of gaming's most consistently excellent series. Interplay came off Fallout 2, and Baldur's Gate riding the strongest run in RPG history, and Planescape Torment refused to coast on that reputation. Built on the Baldur's Gate engine, this borrowed Fallout's character-driven depth and dropped it into a universe unlike mainstream fantasy, the planar city of Sigil, where devils, animated suits of armor, and creatures of pure order walked alongside humans. The setup made the story fearless, waking on a mortuary slab with no memory, discovering immortality, piecing together a past through flashbacks that unlocked old skills rather than forcing a fixed class. Companions carried genuine weight, a succubus who'd given up on desire, a floating skull named Mort, whose insult ability could single-handedly pull enemy aggro, each with distinct dialogue and reactions to player choices. Combat stayed hands-off in true Baldur's Gate fashion, but the writing compensated. Intelligent characters talked past problems entirely differently from how a fighter would brute force the same scene, giving replays genuinely different textures. Spell effects like Meteor Shower turned into full production numbers and massive set pieces, giant iron golems included, sold scale in ways combat alone never could. Hack and slash fans expecting constant combat might find the heavy dialogue focus a slog, and a few key NPCs had short tempers that could spiral into unwanted, hard-to-avoid fights. This stood as one of the most original, ambitious RPGs ever released, and easily one of the year's finest. The DualShock's analog sticks had sat mostly unused for over a year until Sony Japan built an entire platformer that required them no digital pad option, full commitment. Ape Escape turned out to be worth that gamble, a mesmerizing, inventive step forward for what a 3D platformer could feel like to control. Spike chased down time-traveling monkeys wearing intelligence-boosting helmets using gadgets clearly inspired by other classics. A Zelda-style slingshot, Turok-esque power triangles, a stun club that was basically a lightsaber, each mapped to face buttons and swapped depending on the mission. 25 levels demanded revisits once new gadgets like the Skyflyer unlocked previously unreachable monkeys and bonuses, and the capture effect itself, rings of transparent light and particle sparks with a quick camera zoom, felt satisfying every time. Brief, well-placed tutorials introduced new mechanics without breaking pace, and each monkey carried its own quirky personality, checkable through the monkey radar and before capture. Some artistic, some mischievous, some outright dangerous. Controls took real time to click, wrangling fleeing monkeys into the time that felt clumsy early on, and Spike himself came across as a fairly generic protagonist next to the far more charming, screeching monkey cast. This stood as the best 3D platformer on PlayStation, full stop, carving out its own identity entirely apart from Crash or Mario. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater turned a dream most kids never landed, bloody knees on a hometown half-pipe included, into something a couch and a controller could actually deliver. Every surface and every level was rideable, grindable, and reachable, with hidden tapes and secret areas that opened up further as skills improved. 10 real skaters, Tony Hawk, Bob Burnquist, Kareem Campbell, Chad Muska, and more, each carried signature gear and unlockable decks earned through career mode challenges, and animation stayed remarkably fluid, a varial instantly distinguishable from a finger flip midair. Trick variety ran deep too, kick flips, nollies, sex changes, Japan airs, all chainable into massive combos that rewarded creativity over memorized patterns. The soundtrack hit just as hard, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys, and Primus driving the action, paired with sound design sharp enough to make every bale sound genuinely painful. Environments looked detailed even up close, textured tile by tile with no fog masking drool distance, giving levels like Burnside real depth and character. Occasional collision hiccups popped up during bales, characters clipping slightly into walls, though rarely enough to actually disrupt gameplay. This stood as one of the best action sports games ever made, endlessly replayable and impossible to put down. Team Silent formed out of Konami's cast-offs, cancelled projects, and insular developers left mostly alone to make whatever they wanted, and the result stood as the genuine antithesis of Resident Evil. Where Resident Evil leaned on jump scares and resource management, and Silent Hill went subtle, plentiful ammo and health, minimal action, psychological dread built almost entirely from unsettling music and inverted everyday scenarios. Harry Mason searched for his missing daughter Cheryl through a foggy resort town, and that fog wasn't just atmosphere. It was a technical limitation turned into one of the most effective horror tools of the era, limiting visibility to a claustrophobic 10 meters. The radio mechanic added constant tension too, static intensifying based on nearby enemy count, a clever way to build dread without a single visual cue. The other world sections, all rust and inky blackness once the fog lifted, escalated the horror further with tougher enemies and industrial imagery that matched Akira Yamaoka's unsettling score, a blend of Nine Inch Nails style noise and Portishead-esque dread that made entering certain rooms feel dreadful before anything even happened. Dialogue landed pretty flat throughout, voice acting stayed merely bland rather than charmingly bad, and textures carried like a grainy quality that didn't always read as intentional. At around 6 hours, this remains one of the finest survival horror experiences ever made, atmosphere carrying it completely. 18 games, one absurd year for the industry. From horror to racing to fighting games that are still played competitively today, 1999 left a mark that's still visible on gaming right now. Which one are you firing up first? I'm Edward, thanks for watching, God bless, and I'll see you in the next one.